By what name are you known?
There are some who call me Tim.
Welcome to another episode of Timmy Talks, the channel where we talk old school magic. And today we are looking at a game between Robbie playing Erhnam on ice against Antoine playing New Skies. And interesting to note here is that both decks are inspired by other players. Erhnam on ice was originally created by UW and New Skies by Alban Louter. And I'm sure these players have made their own little tweaks. I'm curious to see that. And here we see Robbie with quite a nice opening with a Birds of Paradise and a Llanowar Elf. And that's already a change there, that Birds of Paradise, because that wasn't in the original list. And there's an immediate Swords from Antoine. It's kind of a bolt the bird situation. Only in this case there are two targets and he only has one Swords. And there he plays, it's hard to see with the glare, but he plays the Serendib Efreets. So that's a 3/4 flyer. And there's an Erhnam Djinn on the side of Robbie. So they're really playing their Arabian Nights aggro creatures here very early in the game. And that's a very good response from Antoine playing that Maze of If. And a Mox there as well. So he doesn't really miss that mana drop there. And there's the first 3 damage hit by the Efreet. So that's 17. And let's see what Robbie can do. So we've already seen quite a lot of action in these first few turns. And there's an attack. Mace obviously on the Erhnam, so that means 1 damage for Antoine. Passing turn and first playing a city and playing another Erhnam. But no, there is the counter spell. Well done, that's a mana drain. So that means 4 extra mana next turn. And maybe Antoine has like a Brain Geyser or something that would really help him. So remember, he has 4 extra mana in his mana pool. And that counterspell, I think, is very decisive. And there is the Mind Twist emptying the hand of Robbie. So that's what Antoine used the mana for from the mana drain. And there's an attack. And there's another Erhnam. So he's keeping up the pressure. There's an untap. But that flyer is still doing a good job. And remember, Robbie is top decking at the moment. Antoine is on 13 life, having that mace. And Robbie is on 9 at the moment. And there's another card. It's hard to see. Could be another Efreet, but there's this very annoying glare on the screen, so I can't really see it. And there's another play. An Ice Storm. Finally, there are the Ice Storms. I was like, where are the Ice Storms? And this is going to be a big hit. This is going to be massive. So that's 8 damage coming in. So Antoine's all of a sudden on 5. And yes, I was correct. So there are 2 Serendib Efreets on the side of Antoine. Taking 2 damage there, taking him to 3. And that's 6 damage for Robbie. And what follows is a Psyblast. Yep, it's hard to see with the glare, but it means Antoine wins, and that is a very close game. Let's quickly go on to game number 2 and see what happens after the sideboarding. So it's interesting to see what they're going to board in, because are you going to board in a city in a bottle? But they're both playing with Arabian Nights. Well, we'll see what they've done. Here's Robbie starting with a Llanowar Elf, turn 1. He gets to start after losing the first game. Antoine playing a Tundra. And let's see. If he can get that 3rd mana, there must be an Ice Storm here. And there it is. Yes, and this is like a signature move. Oh, and Antoine wants to take turn, but Robbie says, no, wait a minute. And it's hard to see there, but he's cracking a Lotus, using it to play an Erhnam. And that's a good Swords. Playing another Tundra and using it to cast the Swords. And that means that the Erhnam is removed from the game. And it's 4 life there. Using the dice so that we as viewers can also see the total life count. Still has that Strip Mine to take away the Tundra. Probably a good move there. Still has the Elf to deal some damage. And 2 mana left to play a regrowth. Interesting choice. Bringing back the strip mine. So this is difficult for Antoine. Already lost 2 lands. And he knows if I'm going to put down another land, it's probably going to be removed. So he uses the mana instantly. And he's playing a Chaos Orb. It's hard to see there. But that's a Chaos Orb with a lot of glare. Another attack. And Antoine goes down to 18. And Robbie removes the land. Trying to keep him land poor. But the land just keeps on coming for Antoine. And despite this rocky start from Antoine, he's still on 17. And think about it. I mean, Robbie has used a Lotus. He's played a 4-5. He's done his land removal. Another Ice Storm. Wow, this is brutal. 2 strip mines, 2 Ice Storms. It's almost like I'm watching an EC game here. And there's a strip mine on Antoine's side. And interesting. And that elf is doing some serious damage. I think that elf alone has done 5 damage so far. That's a quarter of his life gone because of a Llanowar elf. And there's a disenchant. Again, Robbie has clearly chosen his tactic of land denial. And why not? If you draw the Ice Storms and you draw the strip mines and whatnot, why not just go with that tactic and use your disenchants to take care of the Moxen? Instead of waiting, for instance, for the Chaos Orb activation. And this is hard for Antoine because he's like, I'm not going to use my Orb flip on an elf. On the other side, the Llanowar elf has already done 6 damage. So it's an interesting situation. And there's even a double hit. And there is the activation from the factory. And what happens? A Psy Blast there. That means it's game over for the factory, and there's the flip from Antoine. So now he is flipping on the elf. And I get it, it's difficult to make that choice. You're thinking, I'm not going to waste my Chaos Orb on an elf. On the other hand, these elves have already done him 7 damage. And especially this one elf that's still there on the battlefield. I think it's going in for damage number 7 right now. And 8 in total. So Antoine's down to 12. It's not too bad though. I mean, he has a chance to get back into the game. There's a Sylvan Library. And that is always very scary. When that happens to me, I just want to play a disenchant as fast as I can. But it looks like Antoine doesn't have a disenchant. Robbie is going to look at the top 3 of his cards. He has a pretty high life total, so he could just decide to take an extra card here, take the 4 damage from the Sylvan, because he is on 22. Gain some life early in the game because of that swords on the Erhnam. And there's another attack. And it's just interesting to see the elf doing so much work. That elf alone has done 9 damage. And oh, there's a city in a bottle. So this is interesting sideboard tech. So that means that Antoine has probably boarded out his flyers, his Serendib Efreets. And what would he have boarded in? Maybe some extra angels? And how many cities? Very interesting. And the city in a bottle is what's keeping him alive at this moment. But there's the Sarah Angel, and this is brutal. Just needs a swords or a balance. Has to discard here. Yeah. At a certain point, your mana are gone. I mean, there's been so much land destruction from Robbie's side that it's difficult for Antoine to keep up with that. And I'm actually surprised that he's still alive looking at the game. And now there's a serious hit with 5 damage coming in. So 4 damage from that angel and 1 damage from the Llanowar. And I think the Llanowar elves should get a medal after this game. And that's the second game. So it's 1-1. Very cool to see that city in a bottle from Antoine. Very curious to see how Robbie will react on this sideboard play. So let's continue to game number 3 and see what happens next. Game number 3 with Antoine on the play. And again, there's this glare, so I can't really see what he's put on the board. Oh, I do. It's a Mox Jet. And the other card must be a land. And passing turn. And Robbie is taking his time. He knows this is the decisive game that's going to decide the match here. And that is going to determine who's going to go to the finals of the tournament in Arnhem, because we're actually looking at a semi-final match of the Camel Trophy. That's an old school tournament that took place in Arnhem, the Netherlands. And there's another play. Again, because of the glare, hard to see. But what already catches my eye is that he's playing City of Brasses now. So maybe he has changed his sideboard plan again, taking out his City in the Bottles. I'm not sure, but it could be. It's a little bit frustrating that I cannot see that card there at the top. It's probably a creature. There is a Disenchant, so it was a Suchi there, so now we can see it. So it was a Suchi, and that one was removed. And there's another city, and there's an angel. And it's interesting to see that we're seeing a lot of cities all of a sudden. So I wonder if Antoine took out his City in a bottle. And it looks like Robbie is not drawing land here, playing a Sylvan Library to help him dig for some land. Oh, and he is playing a city and a sword, so that's very good. He needed that swords. And that brings Antoine back to 21 life. And there's a factory, followed by a Disenchant. And I think that Disenchant is very important. And there's a Time Twister, so that means we're shuffling, but that angel is not coming back. It has been removed from the game. I believe that's the first blue power we've seen so far, and that's quite interesting, taking into consideration that both players are playing with the blue power. And there he goes. And there is the cut, and drawing 7 new cards. There was a card under the playmat of Antoine there. Looked interesting. Let's see. A fresh hand for both players here. And Antoine is passing turn. And maybe you've noticed I haven't speeded up these matches. I try to. Usually I do when I make movies. But these players play quite fast, especially those first 2 games. This game seems to be going a little bit slower. But it was going so fast that it was hard for me to see what was going on, and I thought it would be better to just put this movie out here, put this match out here in normal speed for you. Let me know if you like this or if you want me to speed it up again. There's a Library of Alexandria, by the way, for Robbie, drawing him an extra card. And he's playing a lot of mana, and it looks like he's just using the library to draw 1 extra card and then just put pressure on the board. Not going with the library plan in this case. Putting that angel out there. And it's interesting because both players are playing pretty beefy, meaning they have a lot of creatures and they want to win with creatures. And both players also play with white, so that means 4 swords. You know that that's going to happen. And it seems like they're both drawing their swords at a timely fashion. This is 4 more life for Robbie here because the angel is toast. And now we have 2 removed angels on both sides. And there is a Suchi. And I think I have an idea what Antoine did with his sideboard plan. He boarded out the Serendib Efreets and maybe boarded in Suchis. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't know, but I'm seeing Suchis all of a sudden. And I didn't see them earlier. Then again, the games went by very quickly, so maybe it's not the case. And what's Robbie going to do? They're both on a pretty high life total, so this game could take a little bit longer than the other 2 games that we've seen earlier. And there's really no way of saying who's going to win this one at this point. And this is a hard decision, apparently. I wish I could see his hand right now. So as I said before, this game is played in Arnhem at the LGS, the Vendetta, and it's the first old school tournament in Arnhem, at least that I know of, and it's the first edition of the Camel Trophy, and this is the semi-finals, and he's asking Antoine how many cards he's got, and we count 6 cards there. Is he going to play a Mind Twist? Does he even play a Mind Twist? Because that would be another tweak on the deck. And it's actually quite interesting when players take decks from other players, from other adjustments, and they tweak it further. And that's kind of how decks evolve and not necessarily get better, but get more adapted to the play style, I think, of the player. So I know that Robbie, for instance, is playing with Preachers in his build, and we've also seen him play with Birds of Paradise. So there are some differences with the build from Joop. And I know less about Alban Louter's New Skies deck, so it's hard for me to determine that. When there's a balance, that's interesting. So the balance is quite a good play there, because Robbie pretty much emptied his hand. So I think he's got 3 cards left. Was that 3 or maybe 2? So that means that Antoine has to discard a lot of cards, losing a creature, having to discard. I think the land count is the same, so that doesn't matter. And yeah, he had 3 cards in hand, and Antoine can keep 3. And it's hard for him also to play out his hand, because he only has that 1 City of Brass available. For instance, you see him discard a Disenchant. If he would have had some more untapped land out, he could have at least played the Disenchant. So that's good timing there from Robbie. And there's a recall. So we talked about blue power earlier, and I said I didn't see a lot. And now he's playing a recall, drawing 3. And that is bad news for Robbie, because Robbie used that balance not just to remove the creature, but also to get some cards out of the hand of Antoine. And this is very sour that he can just play a recall after the balance. And I think that kind of tips the advantage very much towards Antoine, also with the creature again on the board, the 3/4 Serendib. So what I said earlier about taking out the Suchis, putting in the Serendibs, ignore that. That's ridiculous. I should go back and study these decks. Anyway, what is he doing now? Tapping 3 mana, bringing in a Preacher, and I talked about the Preacher earlier, so that's going to give Robbie the opportunity to steal the Serendib Efreet on the other side. Of course, not until next turn, because the Preacher still has Summoning Sickness. So there's an attack in for 3, bringing Robbie down to 18. And these players still have a pretty high life total, considering everything that has happened thus far in the match. And interesting to see how Antoine is going to react to the Preacher. And Preacher reads, take control of target creature an opponent controls, but the opponent can choose. But in this case, there is only 1 creature to choose from. And passing turn, I believe he can just activate Preacher at any time. And of course he attacks, but pre-combat, Robbie takes over the creature. At least I believe that's what he's doing. There seems to be some discussion now. Maybe Antoine isn't sure what he wants to do yet, and he's going to read the card here, seeing what his options are. And it's nice when you play with cards like Preacher, these small creatures that have a very cool and strong ability. Usually they get targeted by removal and you lose them, but every once in a while you get to resolve them and you get to actually use them, which is really cool, and it can have a huge effect. And I believe they're discussing about what would happen if you would take over a factory and the factory would turn back into a land. To be honest, I don't know, so if you do, please leave a reply and let me know. I've never been in a situation where that happened, but that is what they are discussing. So as you can see, I've skipped a little bit because the end of the story is that Robbie is taking over the Efreet using the preacher. And there is a maze by Antoine. I mean, it looks like he has the answers ready. And what is he going to do next? Tapping all his mana. I think I see a Brain Geyser there. And a mana drain. No, he's untapping again, passing turn. So Robbie takes the damage from his very own Efreet. And as long as Preacher remains tapped, the creature remains his. But that maze is not ideal. And again, Robbie will need to find a way to play around that maze. I don't believe I've seen him play an Ice Storm this turn. So maybe he's lucky and he can find one at the right moment. And there's some tapping going on. Oh, he's attacking, so he's changing his factory into 2/2. Attacking with his Efreet. And this is an interesting move because Antoine also knows, hey, I have 2 factories to block, so he must have a trick, maybe a disenchant, maybe a swords. And there is the disenchant on the factory. And hey, you just have to try, right? At least it means Robbie has lost a disenchant and he cannot disenchant another target. And it's Antoine's go again. I also see a Spirit Link there in his hand. But he's passing turn. He's taking it easy. It looks like a player who's not in a hurry to play out his resources. He plays in a very control-ish style. And it's working out for him because he's reached the semifinals here. There's a regrowth. Great card. And I do believe, yes. And there's a strip mine taken back, used to get rid of the maze. And this is interesting about the strip mine. You cannot counter a land. So even if Antoine is keeping back some counter magic, it's not helping him in this case. And he's lost at Mace of Hif, taking the damage. And there's a Spirit Link. So all of a sudden we see a change of plans here from Antoine, who's now casting that Spirit Link that he's been holding in his hand for a while. And that means that Antoine now has his own little life gain machine there. So actually taking advantage of the fact that Robbie stole his creature with the Preacher. And there's an Erhnam, and yes, there is the counterspell, the mana drain, that Antoine was holding back for just such a moment. And it's interesting to see how reserved he's playing and how he's always trying to keep something in his hand. So a very control-ish way of playing. Not very aggressive. At least not now. Using his mana, he's tapping. And he's playing on, I believe it's a Suchi. No, it's not a Suchi. It's a Brain Geyser. The Brain Geyser we talked about earlier. Obviously, that makes sense after countering using the mana drain, because he gets 4 more mana to use. And that's kind of the ideal situation when you're playing mana drain, that you have the Brain Geyser. So you take out a huge threat from your opponent, and then you play the Brain Geyser, having that free mana available. In this case, 4 mana. And a Mind Twist. Oh, and this is just so brutal. And this could be the game. This could be the game for Antoine, because this is just brutal. I mean, look at what Antoine did here. A mana drain on the Erhnam. Then he plays Brain Geyser. Then he plays a Mind Twist. I mean, this is just crazy. And I believe Robbie here is pointing out, you've already played a land. And that is true. So Antoine takes back his land. But this is brutal. This is brutal. And another life for Antoine. I mean, Antoine is on 8, so it's not the end, but all of a sudden Robbie is top decking. And knowing that Robbie is gaining, Antoine is gaining a life from that Efreet as well. It's just very annoying when you are in Robbie's seat. And for a minute there I thought, is Antoine scooping? But he's not. He's actually counting his mana, and that's quite a pile. He almost has a deck of land and Moxen alone. Look at that, and there's a little Soul Ring in there. He's, yeah, what shall I do? And remember, this is the third game, so this is going to decide who is going to reach the finals. And he's like, oh, I'm just going to tap these. And I think when you're Robbie, you're like, oh man, there's nothing I can do. I have no cards in hand. And again, because of the glare, I can't see it, but it's got to be a creature. And he's untapping. I believe it's a Sarah Angel. So he played a Sarah Angel there. And Robbie's deciding to untap the Preacher, and then next turn he can take over the Angel. Which would be the better choice, because you can use the Angel to block. And there's the Psyblast. Taking away, and Robbie's scooping, so that Psyblast was the last nail in the coffin. And what a great game here by Antoine, who's moving on to the finals. So that's a 1-2 victory for New Skies. Thank you for watching Timmy Talks, the channel where we talk old school Magic. And if you would like to see more games from the Camel Trophy in Arnhem, keep an eye on the channel, because I will be posting some more matches, including the final of this event. And if you'd like to see more old school Magic now, just click on the playlist that's appearing on the screen right now.
Igitus figitus sumba kazee.